Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to the American Digital Network. It's that time of the week where we talk all women's hoops, and to break it down for us on American Roundball, we have our expert joining us via Skype, Monica McNutt. Monica, hey, how's it going?
It's going very well, Hali. Excited to talk women's hoops once again.
I have to ask you, heading into this week, what's the topic that sticks out to you right off the bat?
We got streakers. I think when you look at the top four teams, Hali, you see it. There's at least a 3-game winning streak and, of course, a couple of outliers, but we'll get into them.
Well, speaking of streaks, that is something that UConn is very familiar with. They have a couple of conference games this week before taking on Louisville next Monday. Is the Huskies streak in jeopardy?
I do not think that the Huskies streak is in jeopardy in the American. They have been head and shoulders above the competition. There's no secret there. And I think after what we saw them do last week against South Carolina, they put a lot of talk to bed in terms of where they stand in the conversation nationally. Will they be clipped up again this year? They knocked out the Gamecocks 83-58. Now, in that particular game, and we'll talk about the week that Gabby Williams had, she had 2 double-doubles, 14 points and 14 rebounds against the Gamecocks. She followed that up with 13 points and 10 rebounds against Cincinnati, and she just really continues to come up big for the Huskies. She's able to give Coach Auriemma the flexibility that he needs in terms of bringing versatility to the court. Now, you mentioned it, the Huskies do have those 2 games, and then they face Louisville. They're 7-0 this year against ranked squads, and the closest team, you and I both remember, that got to them was Texas. And I thought what Texas did was very intentional and deliberate. They were physical. They actually out-rebounded the Huskies by 6, 36-6, and Texas had 14 offensive rebounds, which allowed them to get some of those second-chance opportunities. Now, Coach Walt is no stranger to competing against Auriemma, goes back to the old Big East days, so I'm expecting to see some of the same sort of techniques from the Cardinals. Epsiode is one of the most prolific scorers in the nation, and her running mate, Myisha Hines-Allen, is averaging a double-double for the Cardinals. She's a big presence in the paint. So it's going to be interesting to see how she fares against the trees for UConn of Williams and Stevens. But I'm expecting the Cardinals to come out and be very, very physical. I think this will be a close game, but I don't think ultimately the UConn Huskies streak is going to be in jeopardy, even out of conference.
Let's move on to USF. The Bulls host ECU on Wednesday night before stepping out of conference play to take on Ohio State on Sunday. How do you think Jose Fernandez's squad will fare this week?
Well, first of all, you got to tip your cap to Coach Fernandez and taking Ohio State at this point in the season. I think that they'll be able to take care of business against ECU this week. They're going to protect home court. As much as I love what the Pirates are doing and Coach Heather Macy is bringing to the table, I think for Fernandez, his combination of size and experience really gives him an edge in this particular matchup. I also think that the USF Bulls are on alert, having lost to Wichita State a couple of weeks ago. When you look at their 4 top scorers, Laxa, Jesperson, Ferrier, and Flores, this isn't their first rodeo, and they have an impressive level of continuity, which I think gives them an advantage, and they're going to need all of that continuity when they face the Buckeyes. Now, I think this one's going to be a really, really great game, and I actually think that the Bulls will pull off the upset in this one. You think of the European style of ball that they play. It's a little bit different from what the Buckeyes are used to seeing in their conference. The 2 teams match up well on paper. I like that they both have 4 primary scorers. Well, I use the word primary, but they have 4 guys who contribute consistently to the scoring lineup. Kelsey Mitchell and Kitty Alexa, I'm excited to watch those 2 go at it. It really should be phenomenal. But I think Maria Jesperson might be the X factor in this particular one. She's a big for the Bulls, not as big as Stephanie Mavunga for Ohio State, but Jesperson has the ability to stretch the floor. She can step out from behind the arc and knock down that shot. She does give up a few inches to Mavunga, but I think that's where Alyssa Rader and Tamara Henshaw come in to give Jose Fernandez some of that size. But I think he's going to pit his speed against the size of Ohio State initially. Although Ohio State does have that size, we know about that speed. We know about Kelsey Mitchell. I'm interested to see what advantages the Bulls can take in this matchup.
Let's move on to UCF. The Knights have won 5 in a row. However, they take on UConn Wednesday night. What do you think the mentality of this team is like, preparing to face a team that has continued its dominance this season?
Quite honestly, Hali, if it weren't for UConn up next for the Knights, I would have them continuing to streak as well. So I think when you see a UConn on your schedule, you have to focus. It was funny, I was watching the South Carolina game with my mom, and she's like, if I was playing, I would just tell my coach I'm not playing because it isn't fair. And I really probably should have just said, Mom, life's not fair. You taught me that. But I just went with, you don't get it. You didn't compete at a high level. I think when you play a team like UConn, the coaches approach it as if they expect to win. Players have to approach it as if they expect to win. The diligence is done as far as the scouting reports. And even though UConn plays a very high quality, efficient brand of basketball that is worthy of praise, it is still just basketball at the end of the day. And you play possession by possession. When you look at teams that have been able to beat UConn or even stay competitive throughout the duration of the game, they approach it possession by possession. You think about going back to the Dayton squad that nearly caused some havoc for UConn in the Elite Eight in 2015. I mean, back in the day at Georgetown, we lost by 6 in 2011 in the Sweet 16 to UConn, so it can be done. Last year, you saw Florida State give them the business. They were very close. Mississippi State ultimately pulled off the win. This year, Texas was very close. You can't go in giving them you can't make them not human. I don't want to say you don't give them praise and respect, because you certainly, if there's ever a game that you pay close attention to your scouting report, it is facing UConn if you want to have a chance to win. But it's still basketball. They lace up their shoes, they put on their jerseys, they're going to play in front of their home field or in front of your home field, wherever the game is, but it's still just basketball, and you have to approach it one opportunity at a time.
You mentioned that if this UConn game wasn't on the Knights' schedule, that you would expect their winning streak to continue. What do you expect to see from the Knights after this UConn game? How do you think they'll fare the rest of the week?
Well, I do expect them to rattle off 3 wins. I think they get victories at Temple. They'll host USF, and I think UCF is playing really well right now. I love what they do defensively, so I think they'll knock off the Bulls when they come up to Orlando, and then they'll travel to Memphis. I expect them to get that game on the road as well. I do think they run into a little bit of a shower when they go to Houston. It'll be the Cougars senior night on February 24th. Senior night comes with a lot of emotions, and you want to play well for your seniors at home in their last final contest. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they find their first shower, we'll call it.
Well, you mentioned them. The last streaker comes from Houston. Can the Cougs keep it rolling?
I do. I think it's going to be tough for the Cougs, though. When you look at their schedule, 3 of Houston's last 6 are going to be on the road. Now, that's 50-50. And even when we first started talking Roundball, Haley, Houston was a team that I was watching. I really thought that if they protected home, that they would be okay. But when we talk about streaks, you got to protect home and be a road warrior. So when you look at it, not only are half of their games on the road, the last 3, are in a 5-day span from the 21st to 26th. So I'm wondering how fatigue will come into play there. I've been a fan of what Coach Huey has done all season with his program, but now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of conference play. They've got Memphis on Wednesday. They'll go to Tulsa this weekend, and then they've got a week before ECU rolls into town. And the Pirates are certainly not to be slept on, but I think that week will allow them to re-energize and get ready for that final stretch in terms of the last pull. We mentioned their last 3 games in that 5-day span. It's a gauntlet: USF, UCF, and then Cincinnati. So they're going to have to be a team that stays alert. It wouldn't surprise me if I'm wrong, but I think they might have some showers in their forecast when they go on the road against USF, and Cincinnati.
We mentioned quite a few games coming up on the schedule this week, but what's one game that you think we can learn something from?
Well, I'm jumping out of our top 4 that we just chatted about for quite a bit of time. I'm going down a little bit in the standings, and I'm watching Wichita State and Cincinnati. Now, for sure, those teams are going to be competitive. They're both sitting at 5-5 in the conference standing and jostling for position. They both also need to stop losing skids. I believe 3 losses and 2 losses respectively. I'm intrigued by the guard play in this one. Anna Owens has been steady for Coach Elliott's squad all year, and then Diamond Lockhart is really coming on well for Coach Keitha Adams. So they're going to be fun to watch get after it. When I think of them, I think of a little bit of New York-esque in terms of that city-style guards play. They're going to bounce the rock. They're going to pound it hard. They're going to get into the paint, but they also can shoot the ball pretty well. I'm also curious for Cincinnati about Shanice Johnson's production in this matchup. She's been a little bit down this year, I think, after being the newcomer of the year last year in a 3rd-team selection. But she is coming off of back-to-back double-digit games, and now is a great time for her to find her stride. It'll likely be Johnson or Reiser, I think, who gets tasked with the matchup of guarding the stud and rangy Broussard, who's averaging 19 points and 8 rebounds per game in conference play. So overall, these teams are very evenly matched, both right around 63 points scoring. The Bearcats have a 3-rebound advantage at 40 on games, while the Shockers have 37, and both are giving up about 17 turnovers. So I'm definitely expecting this to be one that goes right down to the wire.
You've mentioned many of the top players across the league in today's episode. Who is a player that you're keeping an eye on this week and expecting a big performance from?
Well, I'm going to stick with one of our streaker teams, and I'm looking at Houston's Jasmine Harris. Now, she's coming off of a weekly honor roll selection, 22.7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals in victories over Tulane and Wichita State. Now, she's had 15 double-figure games for Coach Huey. And I think if Houston is going to stay sharp, I really think that they're the team that might be able to sneak up on some folks. She's going to have to be the catalyst for them. She obviously does a great job of commanding the floor. She finds her teammates. She also knows when she needs to score. So she's got to be the one, if she's going to keep her team in the mix for the next 3, Memphis, Tulsa, and ECU, to make sure they stay on straight just in terms of leadership also, and then obviously her production on the floor.
Wow, well, looking forward to another action-packed week, Monica. Thanks again for joining us here in the studio.
No problem. Thanks, Haley.
All right, well, it's hard to believe we're less than a month away from the conference tournament, so make sure to keep checking back right here each Wednesday for an all-new episode of American Roundball. And day to day, you can follow all of the action on Twitter at American_WBB. Have a great week, everybody.